that, right? We did all of that. Is this what we were working with? Fine. Okay. Is this what we were working with? Fine. So streams. I told you, right? We'll be talking about streams, which was one of the functions inside file systems. We looked at read file sync. We looked at write file sync. We after we learned about async patterns, we looked at what a read file and write file did. So now the concept of streams was introduced for the sole purpose of handling big data. Alright. Now, what do I mean by big data? Until now, right? Whenever we were reading, we read this text, right? We read this text, we displayed it inside the website on things like that, right? We did all of that. But the thing is, we can also read a file which is very large. Now this text file is, some amount of lines. You can see it has some, what, 334 lines. But if we had more lines, which was not enough, like a single variable, if a single variable can only hold a certain amount of data, and the file that we are trying to read, or the data, not only file, right, any data that we are trying to work with or manipulate or process, if it is bigger than the space inside the variable, what do you do? Now a good example would be, let us say YouTube, right? We have talked about this. Now what did YouTube actually do? YouTube streams videos. Now each video would be at least some 3 GB or 4 GB, something like that, right? 4K, 180p, all these things. If these things were like this, would we be able to store a single video, all the data of that video inside a single variable? No, right? We won't be able to do that, because I taught you that whenever a variable, we are creating a variable, memory from the, or storage from the system hardware is going to be allocated to that variable name. Now only a certain amount of space will be allocated. So if YouTube had to show you a video from the backend, from the server, it cannot store the data inside a single variable and pass it on to the front end. Now then how do you actually do it? You do it through streams. So whenever you go look at some YouTube video, right, there'll be two things that will be present inside the play thing. You would see, right, the runtime of play. There will be a red color loading menu and another gray color one. Now the gray color one is known as the buffer, right? You guys would have heard about this term, the videos buffering or things like that. So a buffer is going to be the limit a single variable can hold. Now a video which is very large will be broken down into lot of smaller buffers, and every time you are looking at something, right, the backend of YouTube server would take the video, break it down into different buffers, and pipe it to you. Meaning, it won't give you the whole video all at once. It will give you the video part by part. Like if you touch anywhere inside the buffer loaded scenes, the video would automatically start playing. But if you want to see something outside the buffer loaded time, you would have to let the video load a little bit, because the YouTube is recognized that you are trying to read this timestamp, and it would look at the video and break down that timestamp into a smaller buffer and give it to you. Now this is usually used in place of handling big data. Now let me show you how you can do that using Node. All right. I hope you know, guys, and I'm sorry for the today's delay. All right. I actually got stuck up in traffic. So I hope you guys don't mind. This won't happen again. All right. Now coming back, we read some data and we stored it inside some variable. But right now, if I run this code, right, what will happen? If you go look at port number 5000, you will be able to see all of this data. Now, the node actually had a latest release. Okay. So what happened is the transfer encoding has already become chunked, meaning it has been broken down. Now, any stream, right? All streams, there are four types of stream. One is writable, the another one is readable. Then you also have duplex, then transforms. Now, writable, the word itself is pretty self-explanatory. You would understand what writable means, right? If you have to, or you are trying to write something inside the stream, that is the job of the, don't confuse this with the client side thing. This is the developer side terms. The developer is trying to write something, meaning the client is trying to read something. If the developer is trying to read something, then the client is trying to write something. Because right now, even though we are going through full stack course, we are right now focusing on the back end, right? In the back end, everything is like opposite. If the back end is trying to give you something, give the user something, he will try to read it. If the user is trying to give something to the back end, the back end will try to read it, vice versa, right? So these two things are self-explanatory. Now the duplex is a little bit different. Okay, duplex is actually used in network communication, right? Not normal our HTTP request communication, network communication, but local network communication. I told you, right? Internet is not actually something someone maintains. It is just a network of computers connected together. So you can have a local network which is not actually connected to the real internet, but still people would be able to transfer data in between. Now you might have heard about NASA having their local network and how it is much more faster than the actual internet and all these things. So when you're trying to do something like that, local LAN, it is called LAN, okay, local area network. When you're trying to code something for that, you will use duplex. Now what is transforms? Transforms is a little bit different, okay. Not only are you trying to break things into smaller buffers, but you're also taking it and transforming those smaller buffers into something not everyone can read, meaning some people can read it but not everyone can read. Now think about WhatsApp, right? WhatsApp has end-to-end net encryption. What does that mean? If you send a video inside to someone inside WhatsApp, right, to your friend or someone, what happens? YouTube takes that video, breaks it down. I mean, WhatsApp takes that video, breaks it down into different buffers, and it not only breaks it down into different buffers but also encrypts it, meaning it transforms the data into something that only you and the recipient can read, only the sender and the receiver can read. Anyone else, even if someone else tries to access the server of WhatsApp, hacks into it and gets all the data, right, they won't be able to understand what the data means because it is encrypted. Now that is what transforms means. Okay, so let us see how you can implement this transforms. Actually, you can go to Node. Okay, there is a separate module. I told you, right, these are the all the built-in modules, and there are more built-in modules inside Node. There is actually a separate module for streams. but you won't be using all these things, because it depends upon the special case scenario. Node has to have function for every scenario that has to occur, or else no one would develop using node. But you as a developer only need to know the functions which you will be using in an actual application that you're going to develop. So let us focus on the actual streams which you can use through file systems, because readable and writable are pretty important, and that is what you will do. You can use transforms, or you can just read and write and encrypt it using a different API, right? So duplex and transforms are something that stems from writable and readable streams. So right now I am reading this file and sending that file as a response to the front end. To We are creating a server and at local host port 5000. What we'll do right now is we'll also import file systems, not only read sync. All right, we'll also import, we'll just import entire file systems, and and HTTP. We'll remove this first task first, and the next task running. All I'm going to do is start the server. Okay, and I am going to actually, inside the server, I can read it. I don't have to. Now, when I taught you the basics of JavaScript, we talked about how let worked, right? The local scope and global scope. Now, can someone tell me if this is local scope or global scope? The variable I have defined here, is it local scope or global scope? If I am able to access this variable throughout this program anywhere, right, then it is called global scope. If I am able to access this variable only inside a certain parenthesis or encapsulation, that is called local scope. Now I can write it here and mention this as let. What will happen outside this curly brace? I won't be able to access this file load promise. All right. Why? Because it will automatically get deleted to save memory space. Because you have to keep in mind, every time you are developing some application or program, you always have to not only get the end result, but also make the program more efficient by making it run faster and using less memory. So that is what an efficient program does. So if I create let variable, previously I had created const variable outside the scope. That is inefficient. Now this let variable which I've created inside is going to be efficient. Why? Because it will automatically delete the memory space outside the scope. Now response dot write. I'm reading this. What will happen now? Think about it. Let me reload it. Actually, I'm not saved it yet. Let me reload it. So you can see here what it is showing, right? The response headers or the response data is already coming as chunked. But usually it does not come as chunked. I have installed cores inside my system, so it is automatically getting transformed. All right. If you try it in your system, it won't be chunked. I will tell you how to make it chunked. By default, in my system, it is happening. But to make it chunked for you, what do you have to do? Let me comment this out. I will do this. And what I'll do is file load promise and equal to fs dot create read stream. So I am creating a read stream. This is going to read my text file. So that will be stored inside this variable, right? I can store it inside this variable, but it is automatically going to be chunked because it is streams. Now we have talked about HTTP, right? Now inside HTTP, it is normally you won't have to read stream, or if you want to implement stream, this is how you implement stream inside HTTP. But there are other protocols like stock market uses WebSockets instead of HTTP. You look at any other website, right? You can go to any other website and look at it. It will have this HTTP. But stock markets has to work, in real time, very fast. Not only YouTube videos, right? Stock data is also coming in a stream, and because the stock data never ends, right? It runs from morning till some amount of time till the market closes. So it is going to be keep running, and you have to upload the data or update the data in real time. Streams can also be used to do something like that. So WebSockets automatically have that by default. If you have to implement inside HTTP, you have to use create read stream or one of these stream methods. We have talked about this, right? So what I'll do is instead of writing it like this, I will say file load promise and on and pipe. When you think about, there are two functions which you can use inside create read stream: on and pipe. On will listen for something, pipe will add the data. Now on new data's arrival, like what, when does the YouTube actually buffer new data for you? YouTube will actually look for your timestamp that you are currently watching that video. If it will, let's say it will load 10 seconds for you, and you are right now in the fourth second of that video, it won't load the next buffer until you reach the, let us say, seventh second of that video, because it has already loaded 10 seconds of that video. So the next buffer it will try to load is on 7 seconds. So on the seventh second it will pipe the data of 10 to 20 again inside your video buffer. You understand this concept, right? I hope you guys do understand what you're getting. Yeah, that is global scope, current correct, Saranya. So on something, now it can be anything, all right, but in our case let me say open. What does open mean? Now open is also an event listener. Actually, don't worry about event listeners, okay? I'll be teaching about event listeners in depth when we come to the front end, because only the user can create an event, the backend can only listen for an event. So we'll come to that when we come to front end. Now on open, in this case, what does that mean? When I try to open this URL, open, it will pipe the data. I'll create an lambda expression or anonymous function, and I will say file load promise dot pipe res. And what is this response? This response is already coming from here. we used response.write, response.end, response.status, response dot all these things like JSON, render. Now instead of that, you are actually piping data inside the response. You are not saying response dot something. You are using the pipe to send the data directly into the response. So what will happen when something like that happens? Now, Apsara, do you have some doubt? Okay. So we have also talked about async patterns, right? Now this stream itself is going to be considered async. So I told you what constitutes as an async, right? So why is this read stream async? Think about it for a second. Now the read stream is going to be async because it is actually going to take data in real time and pipe it into our reading stream, right? So it will keep on happening, meaning it has not finished happening yet. So if inside JavaScript, if something has not finished happening, normal JavaScript, not inside node, inside normal JavaScript, if something is not finished happening, what will happen? You cannot run any other code, right? That is what synchronous means, single threaded. Now inside node, if something is still happening, you can actually parallelly run all other codes so that your application does not lag. So what does that mean? This stream in itself is an asynchronous function. So when there is something async, there is obviously a chance of it causing an error because the data can be present or cannot be present. It is a future, right? Only after we get the data, the program will be able to tell it. But in the future, if we did not get the data, if the promise did not resolve and get rejected, what should we do? You should capture that error, whatever error might happen, and handle that error handling. We have talked about this already. So what does that mean? You can say file not found or something, like if the testing.txt, this file did not exist, or if the file name I have given did not contain some letter, then the file I'm searching for won't exist. So what will happen? File won't be found. Now let me run this thing. Let us go inside localhost and see what is going to happen. So you can see it is saying file not found. Why has it not found? There is other thing you can do. Okay, when something is not found, you can see the status code right now is 200. I thought I would teach you about status codes when we come to Express, but I'll give you a brief small thing. Okay, now status codes comes in various formats. Okay, 100 to or 0 to 500 or 0 to 600. Okay, from 100 to 200 they are informational codes. From 200 to 300 they are success codes, meaning it would be green. Whatever we are trying to do is a success. It is saying the backend is telling to the front end you have successfully got what you have requested for. But right now in our case we have not got what we have requested for, right? So what you can do, you can say something like status code and 404. What will this do? This will conduct it in such a way that if something happens, if we did not get the data we are looking for, it is not status codes, it is status. you know well, actually I don't think you can send status until you intervene a middleware or Express. So we'll talk about the status codes once we come to Express itself. But that is what I'm trying to say is, you when something is happening normally, right? when or some error happens, you have to send the status code as a good backend developer. You cannot send 200 status codes when the file is not found. That is going to cause, or that is going to cause confusion to your client or someone who is using your application. So what should you do? You should send 404 error, meaning the client, in our case I'm hard coding the data, okay, but if I did not hard code the data and the data is actually present inside the server, what will happen? If the data is present inside the server normally, then the client is reading the data. If the client is not getting the data he is requesting, it actually means the client is requesting wrong data. So that is a client side error. The client is doing something wrong. Okay, that is called anywhere anything between 400 to 500, 404, 401. All these status codes are client side error codes. These are very important for developers. You know, you can develop an application without a status code. It will always return 200 even if there is an error. But at a later point of time, if you want to update your application, right, the one who is working to update your application writing code will get confused very much about what will happen and how we should do it, because you are not giving the necessary information for the developer to understand what is going on. So status code is a very important information that you should package into your application. All right, we'll talk about this further when we come to express. So this is what streams actually do. What does streams actually do? It uh, variable will not, or it cannot store big enough data, so you have to break it down into different smaller buffers. All right, now that is what is happening here when I'm trying to read this, right? If I actually go into the response, I'm getting the response fully, but it is the transfer encoding will be chunked. Previously it was chunked also, because by default I have made it this way. But in your system, if you try to run this code, right, run the first way, reading it using read file sync, it won't be chunked. It will send it as a whole data, and you will also see something called content length. It is, instead of transfer encoding, you will see another property called content length that is going to be visible to you because your response is very big. It is telling the developer that you should make the data chunked or buffered in streams. So I hope you guys understand what happens in streams. This is what streams does. Now that we have completed the node concepts, so let me give a short recap. We came into node, we after we learned JavaScript and all these things, we looked at what modules are, what you can do, how you can export and import all these different modules, how you can communicate between different files using the export and require syntax, all these things, right? Then we talked about some useful built-in modules. What were they? OS, path, file systems, and HTTP. Now comes the important part. Okay, so until now we were only using get. We are only using get. See, what is get? I am me as a user. In this scenario, I am the developer and I am the client who's using the application. But look at it from the point of view of the client. Okay, the client is getting data from the server to look at it. He's trying to read. So the CRUD functions, when you are trying to read existing data, it means you are getting data. If you are trying to add new data, Now think about Instagram, right? In Instagram, when you're trying to post new photo, it is called posting because actually inside developing terms, adding new data is called post. That is why Instagram called it post. All right, it is not because of something else. It is a developer term, not some hip terms. And when you're trying to update data, now what does updating translates into a real world scenario? When you think about actual post rate, everyone who's commenting to your post is not creating new data. All right, your post will contain is going to be there as an object. It will have one property which is going to be the image. It will have the image value, either some jpg or something. Then it will have your what some caption. It will have the caption data. Then it will have something else, comments and likes count. Now the comment value will be updated every time someone is going to comment inside your post, right? So that is why update is also important. When someone is commenting on your post, he's not actually posting or adding new data to the server. He is changing data that is already present, which is your post, and inside your post is updating comments. All right. And what does delete translate to? If you try to delete a post that you have already made inside Instagram and you delete it permanently, that is going to translate into delete. So whatever data, only these four things can happen. CRUD functions. So until now, what did we work at? We were working with get. We were working only with get. And what is it? It is a request method. Request method. The request URL is this. What we'll be searching. The request method is going to be get or post or put or patch or delete. Now you can do all of that inside node. Okay, but as you saw, node did not was not able to send status codes. So node is a very fast backend development APIs to develop APIs, all right. But when it comes to actual front end communication, it is not as if node does not cannot do the job. It can do the job, but it would be better if you add a middleware. Now, what is a middleware? We have talked about this. When we found out the basic concepts, what do you need to build a full stack application? You need a server, you need a front end, you need a back end. And back end is going to communicate between the server and the front end. It is going to work as a bridge, right? But you can add a middleware between the back end and the front end, and this is known as middleware because it is in the middle, right? And what does it actually do? Now I'll teach you a small concept. If you don't understand it, you don't have to worry about it because this comes under DevOps, all right? When you are trying to build an application, right, you will have a single backend, and you will have lot of services. If you're trying to if build an Instagram application, right, you will have a backend code to add photos, post photos, add comments, all these things. Then for the actual homepage, you would scroll new data, right? You will scroll through everyone else's post. It is called actually an infinite scroll because you know that is a developer term. Infinite scroll means, think about games like Temple Run, apps like Instagram. When you actually scroll through or play Temple Run, all these things, right? The game never ends. It keeps on going. It never ends. Even when you're using Instagram, you can scroll as much as you want. The data won't end. You won't, the posts that you see won't stop. There's no end for the scrolling page. That is called infinite scrolling. Okay. Now to implement something like that, it is a bit heavy processing. Okay. For that, what people do is actually they build another backend to handle request separately for that. Because I told you, right, node makes handles lot of requests, and in one server they will handle request for posting photos, and in another server they will handle the data transfer for page scrolling. So for both these backend to communicate smoothly to the front end, right, some middleware must be present. So this middleware can communicate between lot of backends, lot of servers. You know, the data, both the server or both the backend will be using the same server, but they are separating the backend into two different smaller backends, because you know this technique is called microservice. Okay, what does microservice mean? Microservice is making or breaking down the backend logic into smaller and smaller parts, so that if some part of your code stops working, right, it does not affect your whole application. If this backend stops working, the scrolling will still work. Maybe people won't be able to add photos, but the scrolling will work. If the scrolling fails, the posting will work, but the scrolling won't work. So you can understand, right, if you separate the backend into separate microservices, you can actually mitigate app crashes. So now that is why middleware is important. Again, you can use a lot of frameworks for middleware. Express.js is one of the very best frameworks for middleware. Next.js is also a very good framework for middleware, and Django using Python is also a good middleware. Now, Node.js is good for writing backend. Spring is good for writing backend. So all of them come under the backend framework, but know the difference between, you know, without using Node, I can use Express only to write backend and middleware. I can use Next only to write backend and middleware. But I told you, right, the more you break down your code into smaller chunks and separate the logic, it will be, your app will be more crash resistant, less buggy, and vulnerabilities will be less. I hope you can understand this. So Express. Now inside Express is what there all the CRUD operations will come into play. Okay. And what will this Express actually do? Just a second, guys. Sorry, guys. So coming back, what does Express do? Express is a middleware that is built on top of Node.js. So Node.js is a framework that is built on top of JavaScript, right? So Express is a framework that is built on top of Node. Now that does not mean you have to use Express only with Node. Okay. If you develop using Python also, using Django, a backend, you can use Express as a middleware. It does not mean something like that. We are going to do the MERN tech stack, which means MongoDB for server, Express for middleware, React for front end, and Node for backend. You can also use mean instead of React. You can use a. There are a lot of tech stacks. You can go and look at the different tech stacks and what tech stacks are used by companies. What learning these tech stacks will give you a good job opportunities. All these things. All right. So, Mon middleware built on top of Node. In our case, all right. Now, now let us come into the status codes. Again, to use Express, unlike Node, you don't have to download something from the internet and use it. Okay, you can just use the npm command. We talked about the npm commands, right? Okay, I did not yet teach you the npm commands. You know, before moving on to Express, let me teach you some more commands. All right, these are the commands we have looked at right now. So let me teach you some more commands that will be helpful for you. So the first thing, whenever you are trying to develop an application, right, you won't be the only person who is going to work on that application. There'll be a lot of people who will be working on that application, right? So everyone must understand what is going on in the code, and everyone must understand what packages you are using, what drivers you are using, what server you are using. So to do something like that, we already looked at one of the ways that companies use, that is the commenting, right? I did teach you about how to comment, right? The single line comments and the multi-line comment. But apart from this, in actual corporate environment, they maintain a file which specifically tells you what the project is doing. Now, this must happen inside every project, not only inside a node. Okay, this must happen inside every framework. Every framework will have a different way of doing it. Okay, Dart has something called YAML. YAML is also a markup language. Anything that ends in ML is known as markup language. HTML, hypertext markup language. YAML is something that can store data. But inside JavaScript frameworks, JSON is used. Okay, what is JSON? Now, this is the JSON syntax. Okay, this is the JSON syntax. If you look at it closely, right, you will understand something. It looks very similar to object syntax. So this is what an object does, right? So this is the syntax of creating an object and storing data. Now, why is this objects concept important? Anywhere some data is transferred, right? From now on, look at this carefully. Whenever you are importing and exporting, or whenever you are installing packages like Express, also, what will happen is all the data will be treated as an object. Why is it treated as an object, not as an array or string? Because when it is treated as an object, right, even though there are lot of data structures like linked list, all these things we've talked about, this object is a good data structure which will let you access the data immediately. Okay, you don't have to traverse through something. You can just say object name dot property name, right? Object name dot property name. If it was this, you can say a dot property name dot notation, so that you can access the data of that property easily. You can see here property name, property value, comma, property name, property value, comma, property name, and here the property value itself is an object. and inside that there is a property name, property value, comma, property name, property value. You end this object, comma, property name. You can understand this, right? How this is going. So this is useful so that the data you are storing is not only readable by computer fast, it is also readable by humans fast. Because now think about it, if you use a linked list data structure and try to store data, the computer can read it fast, but can you read it fast? No, right? If a human looks at that, his brain will explode, because he won't understand what data is located. So JSON is a good encrypting, or it is not encryption, okay? It is just a rule. You can say it is rule, or it is a protocol. You cannot call it a protocol, okay? It is, you can call it a standard, okay? Standard or rule or something like that. So it literally says you have to follow this object syntax. Now why did I talk about JSON much? JSON, the thing is also important. We'll come back to JSON, but right now it is important because we are going to store data about the project you are going to create. How do you do it? You use npm init. Npm init is a command that will help you create something called package.json. And what will this package.json do? Let me say npm init. Now, when you say npm init, right, you have to manually set everything. If you are not, you are a beginner, try to do npm init dash y. And what will this do? This will set everything to default. Let me show you both ways. If you say npm init and hit enter, right, you have to manually set everything inside the package.json file. But if you say npm init dash y, right, you don't have to do something like that. Npm init dash y. Now look at the testing folder. Now we have modules testing and testing.txt. But I am going to do npm init dash y, and it is going to create another file called package.json. What is it going to do? It has created a file. And what is this file actually containing? It contains data of our project. So right now you can see the name is testing. The application name is testing, or the folder name is testing. The version, we have not completed the app, or we have not even updated something. So the version is 1. The description, the developer has to give the description here, okay? And the main file is module testing.js, and the scripts is test. You can create your own scripts. Let me teach you about all this, okay? Keyword meaning, whenever you are searching for something, you can use this. And the author, if normally the author would be some company, okay, like Cognizant or something, because you won't write, if you are the only one writing the application, you will write your name inside the author. But normally companies license the software, and companies are the authors of application, okay? So you don't have to worry about the last 3. But this is important right now, because whatever package you are using, we are going to, right now we were only using a single file, and I was showing you concepts inside Node. But if I was to develop an actual application, I would have multiple files, multiple folders, multiple packages, all these things. Now let me teach you the next command that is going to help you actually install packages. npm I or npm install package name. You can give multiple package names. Package name 1, package name 2, all these things. All right. And just like that, you can say npm uninstall package name. This will uninstall packages. There are different ways you can install packages, okay? But let me show you the most basic one. Now what is npm actually? npm, this command won't work for you unless you have installed node inside your system. This is why I told you node is something that every developer, whatever, regardless of the framework you are working with, you have to use node or install node inside your system, because node will help you maintain data for your project. Node package manager, that is the full form of npm. Okay, and this npm will help you manage packages, like all the package. Let me show you some examples. Okay. npm I express, we are going to work with express, right? So let me say express. What does it do? Psycho. So what does npm I express do? It will download the express package from the internet and install it inside your project. And you can see our project now depends upon express. You know, there are millions and millions of packages. You can go to npmjs.com and you can search for any package that you want. And what will it actually do? It will give you all the packages that you can use. Now you can see this is a node.js module available to blah, 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 blah. So it is saying to install npm or express, you have to run the command npm install express, or you can also say npm I express. Now the latest version is 4.19.2. Since I have just installed it, it is 4.19.2. But there will be legacy projects, right? Now, Facebook is not actually application that is created today, right? It is an application that has been created years ago, some 10 years ago, let us say. So at that time, Express would have been in a different version number. Now, for every version, Express will add, remove bugs, and add new methods, all these things, right? So the more version, the latest version will have latest features and lesser bugs. But if you are using previous versions, right, you must know, the developer must know what methods to use, what bugs that version has, and how to handle all these things. So that is important. All right. Now that is why this package.json is really important, so that everyone in the team, even a newcomer, can take one look at the package.json file and understand what are the dependencies, what are the packages that are going to be used inside our project, what version number is it is using, and how you can actually you can even update it. If you update it normally, right, it would cause error in the application for methods that have been deprecated. The term deprecated means it is removed. In the previous versions of express, the status, we talked about status, right? Status was not actually status. Okay, it was status code. But right now it has become status, so that developers don't have to type length long word. Even though it is a smaller change, it would still cause problem inside my file. If the developer is using status code, right, it would cause error. So that is what you must do. You have to look at the dependency, the version installed, and code work with the project regarding according to that. Now this is one way. npm I is one way to install something inside your project. npm I express or npm install express, you can say anything. But there are other ways you can install data or install packages. Now why do you need packages at all? You need packages for the sole purpose of making development easier. Okay, I told you how express makes development easier, right? We talked about how middleware express makes development easier. But there are other things that will make developing easier, but won't be necessary for the software. Like, until now, right, every time I made some code changes to the code, I ended the server and restarted the server. But right now, right, I am going to install something, a package named nodemon. And what does nodemon actually do? Nodemon will help you restart the application automatically. These are the other ways you can install nodemon. You don't have to say something, save all these things, right? Let me show you a simpler way. Yeah, actually, yeah, you don't have to do like this also. The simplest way to install a development dependency. What is a developmental dependency? Now I am going to develop my application with Express package. That is why I have installed Express. But I am not going to need nodemon. Nodemon does not give me any functions that will be used for development, but it is going to help me in development by running the code or running the node command every time I make changes to the file. So I don't have to terminate the server and start the server again. So it is useful for development, right? But it is not going to be deployed in the server, because inside the server we don't need something like that. So you install something like that inside developmental dependency. How do you do something like that? You say npm I some package name and dash capital T. So this is how you install a package inside developmental dependency. Now there's another thing I have to teach you about. When I said npm init dash y, it created package.json. But the moment I installed Express, right, two other things got created. One is node modules. These are actually not node modules, okay? These are not built-in node modules, but these are going to be modules that we have installed. We installed Express, right? But all these other things are necessary for Express to work. That is why all these other things are also downloaded from the internet. Now, if I download nodemon npm I nodemon dash capital D. Instead of this dependency, it will create another property called developmental dependency. And nodemon will be present inside there. So you can see this is dependency and this is developmental dependency. You can see, right? Nodemon, the version is 3.1 point something. This is the latest version. So like that. Now, why is this nodemon important? I'll show you. Okay. The moment you install nodemon, more files. The moment you install nodemon, more files regarding nodemon will be present inside this node modules. The more packages you use, the slower your application will get. Even though packages help developing faster, keep in mind the more packages you add, the slower your application is going to get. So that is the reason why microservices were invented. You don't have to use all the packages inside a single backend. You can create packages or microservices. If you are doing for scroll, you can install packages only for scroll, create a separate backend. If you are trying to do post, then you can create a backend separate for that and you install packages inside that. You don't have to create a single backend, install all the packages inside the single backend and do all the functions. That is going to make the application heavy. So this is called developmental dependency. Let me show you another thing. So I have done this, right? Node module testing. It has started this localhost server. Now it is working like this, right? But if I do some changes, let me say I say console.log hello and save it, nothing happens. It is not going to get printed inside the console. Why? Because the actual thing has not been updated. Even though I have saved it, the server has already running. I have to terminate the server, Control C, and run the command again. Now you can see hello is printed, right? But if I delete it and save it again, I have to terminate it, run it again to know that the hello is not going to be printed. But I can use nodemon. How do I use nodemon? Nodemon module testing. What is this going to do? Nodemon module testing.js. Just a second, guys. Why isn't nodemon working? Nodemon is not working. Now let me try to install nodemon globally. Instead of this, let me do something else. Okay. I think you cannot run the nodemon modules testing.js directly. What you have to do is you have to create a script that will run nodemon modules testing. Now try to you can create your own commands, okay? Like for test, for starting, for building, for all these things, you can write your own command and you can say npm that command name. And what will that do? It will try to run the command you have given in the property value. So in my case, nodemon is running modules testing, right? And what is that nodemon actually doing? It is going to run node modules testing, the command we were using previously only. But what it is actually going to do is every time I make a change to the code, what is going to happen? The moment I save it, it is automatically restart due to changes. I don't have to terminate the server. You can understand, right? Why I have installed nodemon inside developer dependency. Because this is only going to do this thing. The moment I finish developing the application, this package is no longer necessary. I can uninstall it using npm uninstall. The command I just ran, that is called global thing. If you are an actual developer, right, you can say npm install dash g package name. And what is this going to do? This is going to install it globally, meaning if I run it inside testing, if I run the same command, global command inside testing also, it will install it inside global. But I have only ran npm I command inside testing folder, meaning the nodemon package will be installed only inside my testing folder. but I can install it globally also. All right, I hope you can understand this. So this is how you set up a starter project. Okay, you can use the npm init command to create a package.json file. You can install all the packages that is necessary for your project. You can uninstall packages after it has become redundant. And further commands we'll look at it the more we go. Okay, so guys, I think we'll end the session here today. If you guys have any doubts right now, you can ask me. No, okay, guys, if you guys don't have any doubt, let us end the session here today. We'll meet in the next session. Anyways, guys, thank you. You can leave the class right now.